Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Let's get controversial. Why not, eh? Let's lose a few subscribers. Let's have a few comments, hate comments in the comment section. Look, I was having a conversation with someone about Mike Tyson, and we were discussing whether Mike Tyson was overrated, is overrated. And I was saying in some quarters, definitely yes, but not necessarily amongst people who actually know what they're looking at and understand the history of Tyson and followed his career from start to finish, because Mike Tyson was an extremely good fighter. Top 10 heavyweight, you can make a case for that, no question. But in some quarters, he'd have smashed through Ali, he'd have just obliterated Foreman in a couple of rounds, he'd have done Joe Louis, and They buy into this myth, the legend, the cult of Mike Tyson. They are essentially fanboys, as we know. And when it comes to fanboys, you kind of want to lose it because you can't really reason with them. They're just too devoted. They're too cultish. Cultish, I said. Although the alternate could have been equally valid. But look. So I think Mike Tyson, to call him, the greatest heavyweight ever is a massive, massive exaggeration. And I think that some of the criticisms against him are very valid. Now, that is not to say that Mike Tyson could not have beaten, on his day, every heavyweight in history, including Ali, Lewis, all the rest of them. Joe Louis, Lennox Lewis, Ali, whoever you want to mention. Because he had such ferocious natural ability, explosive punching power, explosive movement. He was a small heavyweight, as we know. In his pomp, he probably weighed about 212 to 215, roughly. Not big, even by the standards of heavyweights back in the late 80s, second half of the 80s. His speed was incredible. His technique was excellent. He was not a crude slugger, as people say, a lot of younger people say. It wasn't all about punching power. It was technique. It was, low center of gravity, lots of swiveled movement and bang, 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 explosive. Did he have a lot of variety to his work? Probably not. He even had a decent jab when he chose to use it. Probably didn't use it that much. Great body puncher. Actually, when he was on the up, a lot of people were saying he's a converted southpaw, which means, he's an orthodox fighter, but he was originally, his natural instincts, I don't know whether he's left-handed or not, I think he is, but his natural instinct was to, fight as a southpaw, and hence the reason he had, such a fantastic left hook, But he was a great fighter. I've got no problem with him being called a great heavyweight. And for a period, I would say that period being sort of late 86 to 88, at the time I would have been 86, I would have been 19, so 88 I'd have been 21, turned 21. I thought this guy is going to be the oldest heavyweight champion of all time. At the time, it was Jersey Joe Walcott, because Foreman hadn't beaten Walcott's record, and Jersey Joe was 37 at the time. And I thought, well, Mike Tyson, he can rule for as long as he likes. The only person that can beat Mike Tyson is Mike Tyson. Mm-hmm. And guess what happened? He kind of beat himself. When he was defeated by Buster Douglas, I've said this so many times in videos, but it bears repeating because it explains the aura that was around Tyson at the time. When he was defeated, I woke up the following morning and couldn't work out whether I dreamt it or not. It was that shocking to see Tyson flailing around, who previously had looked completely impregnable. He was dropped by Greg Page in sparring in the lead up to the Douglas fight. But look, let's go back. Let's have a brief sojourn through his career. We know about the up and coming Tyson blasting out Marvis Frazier in one round, stopping Jose Revolta in 10, who was a big man himself. The former cruiserweight champ, Alfonso Ratliff, went out in 2 rounds. He was beating all the usual, journeymen like Steve Zuski, Lorenzo Boyd. Reggie Gross got stopped in a round, and I think would later on go about 7 or 8, I think it was, with Frank Bruno. And then he got in the ring with Trevor Berbick. This was in November of 1986, and destroyed him in 2 rounds. And Berbick had been stopped by Bernardo Mercado in 1 round previously, but that's because he hung his chin out. He was mocking Bernardo Mercado, and Mercado chinned him in a round. Well, he wasn't hanging his chin out against Tyson. Tyson was finding it explosively so. And Berbick was an extremely durable guy who would go on to never be stopped again. He went on to win a lot more fights. And then he fought James Smith, another big punching guy, a bigger guy, much bigger man. Pinkland Thomas got stopped in 6. Smith was just hugged for 12 rounds. James Smith, Bone Crusher, did. Tony Tucker, another one who just hung on for dear life and went the distance. One of his best performances, without question, is Tyrell Biggs. He stopped him in 7, but Biggs, he had a reputation for being a crackhead and all the rest of it, but he was on it that night. He was fully prepared, very, very well prepared. And Tyson just chopped him down. He was moving well, but Tyrell Biggs on that night didn't look like a bad heavyweight. He'd beaten most heavyweights that night, but Tyson chopped him down. Then he got rid of Larry Holmes, who was coming back, done him in 4. Holmes was never stopped again, and carried on to have over 50 or 60 wins? 60 wins, was it? So yeah, and he carried on, but then the crack started to show. Jim Jacobs had died of cancer. Custamato died before he won the title. Jim Jacobs had died of cancer. He was left with Bill Caton, who was one of his managers, one of the 2 managers, and he didn't really get along with Caton. Caton sorted out all sorts of incredible financial deals for Tyson, including a pension scheme that would have paid him about minimum of like $100,000 if he retired at 30 or something. I can't remember the details exactly, but it was, bear in mind, this was 1988, and he was just, but Don King got in his ear, started talking shit to him, getting rid of all the old guard. Out went Kevin Rooney, who was the last man standing from the Custamato days. In came, Jay Brighton, Aaron Snowall, who were basically bucket carriers, didn't have a clue about boxing, haven't done anything before or since as far as training fighters goes. And the crack started to appear. Suddenly Tyson, he was having scraps outside, with Mitch Green. He had a little rematch with Mitch Green. He beat Green on points. Green was another one who hung on for dear life. And then in the street, he busted Green's eye socket, didn't he? Then he was involved in a car wreck. And then Robin Givens came on the scene, the ultimate gold digger, repulsive individual, and fleeced him. And so he lost his way. He ended up going to prison for rape. But by that point, he had lost to Douglas, and he was on the comeback trail. But it weren't happening. I mean, was it 1991 he went to prison? Now, he came out and he won another couple of belts, but he was never the same. In fact, he'd gone downhill before he went to prison. I mean, it really was striking how different his performances were. And he was getting hit way too much, way too much. Now, the criticism of Tyson is something that Teddy Atlas has often talked about. And it's a criticism you often hear, and that is that he never came from behind to score a win. He almost did with Douglas, with a 1-punch knockout, and Douglas just about beat the count. 9 3/4 or whatever, 9 7/8 or whatever it was. And Tyson would go on to twice lose to Holyfield. Basically, he bottled it in the second fight, got himself disqualified. He got knocked out by, and the rest, the drill. He got knocked out by, Danny Williams, and Lennox Lewis beat him before that. And so he was really running on fumes, running on his name, basically. But the argument that he never came from behind to score a victory when he was losing a fight does hold water. And if you look at his entire resume, the only occasions when he showed real grit in a long fight there were actually 2 fights back-to-back with Donovan Razor Ruddock. He stopped Ruddock very controversially in 7 rounds in the first fight, which was give or take, it was a slugging match. There was no finesse with Tyson there, so no finesse from Ruddock. Ruddock had a huge left hook, a sort of hybrid uppercut left hook thing going on, and he shook Tyson a few times. That was a great fight, but it was curtailed, and then they had a rematch, and that went the 12-round distance. And Tyson showed a lot of grit in that fight, a lot of grit. He won most of the rounds, but Ruddock was there punching hard. And Ruddock was a pretty big lump, 6'4", quite big with it. Hard guy, hard, tough man. And then after the second Ruddock fight, Tyson went to prison. Didn't get out. He got out, was 95 he got out. And it was Peter McNeely and Buster Mathis Jr. And there was that farce against Bruce Seldon. He beat Bruno a second time. Bruno absolutely petrified before that fight. The first fight, Bruno didn't do bad. He kind of controlled this considerable nerves. But in this rematch, he got stopped in 3 rounds and then he bumped into Holyfield. So if you look at his second career, if you like, his post-prison career, absolutely no evidence that Tyson ever even hinted at coming from behind in a fight to win. He got battered basically by Holyfield. Beaten up by Lewis, knocked out by, quitting against Peter McNeely. Essentially, he quit against Danny Williams as well. He could have gotten up, he decided not to. He was cut and laying by the ropes, but he could have gotten up. He just thought, the hell with this. But he was making money on his name, a considerable amount of money, and spending enormous amounts of money. But in the first career, apart from the Ruddock fights, I can't really see how anyone can deny that he never came back from adversity to win a fight, that he never hung tough, that he never. In a sense, you could say that the performance against Douglas, as bad as it was, he took his lumps, just like he did against Lewis. But he was, as Teddy Atlas always says, a game quitter. In the sense that I'm going to take this beating, but I don't actually think I can win. I've kind of given up psychologically, mentally. So I think that holds water. And I do think that argument works against Tyson's legacy. Because unlike, say, Ali, it was an obvious example, who was beaten by, Fraser in a hell of a 15-round fight, not a 12-round fight, of course. Came back to beat Fraser twice. Lost to Norton. Okay, I thought Norton won at least 2 of those fights. Maybe the middle one, you can give it to Ali. He edged it, maybe. But Norton really was kryptonite for Muhammad Ali. And, of course, Ali, rank underdog against George Foreman and Sonny Liston. Stopped them both, knocked out Foreman, forced Liston to quit, and essentially roll over in the second fight. I don't know what was going on there, but he done him in a round. There's nothing that even comes close to comparing to that type of fortitude on Mike Tyson's resume. But he was a highly explosive, highly entertaining, extremely hard punching, really exciting heavyweight champion. But I think this is the point. This is the point that Hall of Fame fighters of any weight, not just heavyweight, of any weight, can still be overrated. Some people might say Sugar Ray Leonard's overrated, even though he was a great fighter. Why? Because he didn't give Marvin Hagler. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this, but Sugar Ray Leonard didn't give Marvin Hagler a rematch. Picked and chose it's kind of set the template for Mayweather. Picked and chose a lot when he came back. Fought Hearns after Hearns had gone life and death with James Kinchin. Fought Duran at super middleweight when Duran was in his 40s. I mean, you can make that out. You can make these arguments for anyone. But I do think that when people talk about Mike Tyson, I probably wouldn't have him in my top 5 heavyweights of all time. I'd have him in my top 10. But I think people need to recognise that being overrated doesn't mean that you're no good. You can be very good and still be overrated. I think in his prime, Tyson Fury was a very good heavyweight, but a lot of people were vastly overrating him, including himself. I'm the greatest heavyweight of all time. Based on what? Absolutely zero evidence for that. It's a statement. It's not even an argument. It's a statement. You know. But yeah, look, tell me what you think about Tyson, about Mike Tyson, not Tyson Fury, Mike Tyson. Do you think he's overrated? What do you think about him? How highly do you rate him? Would you have him in your top 5? Would you have him in your top 10? Let me know. Let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. And of course, thank you for your time. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. And I will catch you all later. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.